Hi everyone. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for and everyone to invite me. And this is the first time I've done in person, so most of the time it was remote that I presented. So it's good to be here in person. I'm here whole day. So if anybody wants to talk further, feel free to reach out. So before I start, who here has heard the term RFCs? Can I have a raise of hand? Very good. And the term IETF? I'm expecting. Oh, pretty good number. Usually we have much more higher number for RFCs, but nobody knows where it comes from. But so that makes my job a little bit easier. But and feel free to ask a clarifying question in between, and there is enough time at the end as well. And we are starting right at time. So I'm Dhruv. I'm part of the Internet Architecture Board. I'll talk a little bit about how the organization is structured, and there is this board which is called Internet Architecture Board. We look more at the long-term impact of internet on various things that you guys have been talking today as well. And we liaise with more external organizations. So it's more long-term administration / architectural role. And I'm one of the board members. I also chair 2 working groups at ITF, which are in routing and operation areas. So one of them is called Path Computation Element, which is very SDN-like protocol that has been developed in the ITF, focusing on how from a controller you talk to devices and give them path information, and that's the name PCE, Path Computation Element, comes from. And another is segment routing. Maybe some of you are technical thing. This is pretty must have heard the buzzword around it. So there is this SRv6 operations, a very brand new operations working group, which looks at how do you operate an SRv6 networks, what are the challenges and things like that. And I do a bunch of other things you guys can read up at your free leisure time as well. So let me start with our mission statement. This is ITF mission statement, codified in an RFC 3935. Let's read it. Make the internet work better by producing high quality, relevant technical documents that influence the way people design, use, and manage the internet. So it's pretty straightforward. We do not control the internet. We do not police the internet. Don't come to me. My dad calls me like, internet's not working. I thought you do so much things. Why can't you get it fixed? I can't do any of those things. We just write the documents. And all we do is make sure that the documents are relevant, they are of high quality, and they meet the requirements which are coming from a global internet space. So that's our mission. Some key ethos, the things that I want you to remember at the end of the things, sometimes long presentations. Let's just put 4 points that should be the highlight. ITF is different from some other organizations in the way that it works. First, anybody can participate. All you need is an email address. It doesn't even have to have your name there. Just by having an email address and by joining an ITF mailing list, you just become part of the ITF. No checkings, nobody's barred from being part of an ITF organization. All our information, especially our outputs, are completely available for free. So anybody can download an RFC, no checking. All information is available there. Not just RFCs, even all the versions of the document, the first time they are available till the last, every meeting discussion, everything is available online for free. So there's no charge available, nothing. Anybody can participate. All information is completely in open. And we do something what we call as rough consensus. That is, we judge the contribution based on its technical merit only. There is no voting. Nobody gets to, like, it's not like how a UN, like an organization would run, nor it's like where you can, play and play. Like I become a part of an organization and I get some board seats or you get some kind of control. None of that happened. Even when I am on an Internet Architecture Board, I don't get any special thing. I have to go and prove the consensus on the floor, and based on the technical merit, the output is judged. Whether, yes, enough people in the room are agreeing with this is technically sound, and yes, we can move ahead with this particular proposal. And even if we write an RFC, that doesn't guarantee you anything. It doesn't mean that somebody will go and implement it. ITF can just write an RFCs, and there are RFCs that are written that are never implemented, because everything is volunteer. somebody sitting at an operator needs to decide that, yes, this is worth deploying. And before that, a vendor has to decide, oh, this is worth implementing. That, yes, this browser feature that some working group has written, there is actually a need to do it, not just because there is an RFC for it. That doesn't mean that somebody will go and invest their money to develop, then an operator to deploy, test, and all the whole thing that happens. So everything is voluntary. And that makes IETF output very, very important, because if we produce output that other people don't feel is of use, the IETF as an organization would lose its value and this thing will fail. So we have to write technical good outputs that the market as well as people who are using it continue to see value in it. So that's our key message. And I'll try to move a little faster moving ahead. So there are lots of standards organization in this space. We all hear about 3G, 5G, 4G. That's again at the sort of lower layer. IEEE does a lot of Ethernet standards. And similarly, if we go on the top layer, a lot of web standards and lots of standards over the internet that we work in. But everything in between to lower layer protocols to higher layer, that's sort of OSI modelish. If you guys remember in your networking classes, that's where IETF comes in. So we start with internet layer, things like IP, DNS, UDP, TCP. Those are our internet thing. Then becomes routing, all the routing protocols. Initially, we used to have a transport protocol, which was separate. But as you know, in today's world, web and transport have been slowly integrating. If some of you have heard of new transport protocol like QUIC, which are integrating a lot of features of title coupling with security, title coupling. So that is sort of reflecting even in way the IETF organizes its work. And that's a new area called web and internet transport. And over this is applications. And on two pillars on the side, you have to worry about security at all levels. Every level needs to be secured. And similarly, you need to worry about operations and management of every protocol across the layer. So that's sort of like a rough idea of everything that IETF is involved in and some of our key protocols. I hope some of this you might have heard. Even if you are using your modem, sometimes you have to go and change things and change settings, fight with your operators. So these are some of the settings you might have already seen. One question that comes to especially from Internet Architecture Board or IETF is as if IETF has a big blueprint of how an internet architecture should look like. Actually, we don't. This is not what we do. What we actually do is something like this. All we do is make building blocks. And those building blocks, somebody assembles as Lego blocks and come up with new things. And that's the beauty of the way which internet was designed. And it is different from other big systems. Maybe if you think of telephone systems and other systems which were designed as a much bigger blueprint of how a network should look like. But here you have full permission to play with the outputs that the IETF does, which are just Lego blocks, and make sure how it meets your requirements. That allows you to play with it and come up with new innovations. And that's one of the reasons internet has been so innovative, because there was no top level design from the start and people just started using the existing things, mixing them together to meet the requirements that they had. So this is something that I like to use when I'm talking about IETF. Some ideas of some of the things have been going on for 40 years, 30 years. I also wanted to put some of the new work that has been happening. I mentioned QUIC. There is a good work on media over QUIC, which is improving lots of ways in which, everybody remembers how difficult it was to watch videos and buffering and all those things. Now we don't even think about it when we are watching our Instagram reels. Some of the improvement is because of media over QUIC and new technologies of web RTC, how we do Zoom versus how our Yahoo messengers used to work from these days. These are all improvements in the protocols that have been done at the IETF. Improving in our security and privacy, from moving from TLS 1.1 to 1.2 to 1.3, improving HTTP to HTTPS, all of these works happened at the IETF. There is good work happening also in performance optimization, something called L4S, and a lot more things related to QUIC. I actually have a few slides about the new work which are proposed in this current next ITF meeting, that will again give you an idea of some of the new work that is happening. ITF is global. There are lots of people from all across. It's a big community. And let's look at the last Asia Pacific meeting that happened, which was in Brisbane. We still have like folks from US and Europe leading the way. That's always been the key folks that participate. There are a few from India, Canada, good chunk from Australia. That's one reason for us to keep moving. We do get more participation from folks when the meeting is in your part of the world. And just a snapshot of not just looking at the meeting, but looking at ITF in general. So how many people who are currently active on our mailing list? Around 7,000. How many people who overall register in a meeting as we move our meetings across the world? Around 5,000. How many documents are published? How many are internet draft authors? How many RFCs are published in a year? Around 173. So it's a pretty active work. Nobody in the ITF is involved in all the activities. It's impossible to do, and it's a vast landscape. But the skill that sometimes we need is understanding the very high, bigger picture, and then figuring out how your building block, how your Lego block connects with the rest things around it. And since there is no grand big picture, this is how ITF and ITF protocol continue to work in this kind of setting. Another by geography, overall community, not just from a meeting point of view. As I said, we have US, North America, and Europe leading the way. They are the most number of people who participate. Asia is increasing, but still not as much. We still need to do a long way in pushing for more and more people to participate in the internet standard space. There are people like, I've worked in India for so long, people in companies who are involved, who use the ITF output, but do not always contribute back in the process. So that is the mindset that we need to change slowly and start contributing back to the ITF as well. And like any other organization, we suffer from a gender bias. There are 85% who are men and few women and non-binary folks in our community, which we always needs to be aware of and work towards improving. One mantra that ITF uses, we believe in rough consensus. I talked about rough consensus, and also running code. So what that means is we want to see our output actually in working before we go and standardize. Anything that has been already deployed and we have received implementation feedback gets a higher, in merit when you are judging consensus. So it's not just like whether it looks good on paper. Does it actually work? Is there actually interop that has happened? And that's why ITF does various things like hackathon, which invites a lot of people to come and work on things which we are currently developing and contribute back to the ITF by having this thing. So many students, many research institutes do participate in ITF, where they focus not so much on actually writing, coming up with new standards, but testing them, measuring them, comparing them, and giving those outputs back to the ITF, which are inherently used in changing how our standards should be written. So it's a cycle that works really well. And that's another way to contribute. Like sometimes coming up with a new idea or writing a standard feels this thing, but we have all implemented it, tested it, written papers about, measuring this under this conditions. Those are also valid inputs to ITF. It's not always a brand new idea, and somehow that's how we value more, but we shouldn't. So we go to these organization students. If you have inputs about how our protocols are working, how our outputs are working, that's equally valuable. And there are enough venues within the ITF system, like Hackathon, like MapRG, which all it does is measurement research group about ITF protocols, so that we can give output back to the ITF of how our inputs are working. So I wanted to make sure that messages go out. A big organization structure, any organization just have it. So the things in the red box, that's where the real work happens. That's what is mainly our IETF as a body. So we are divided into various areas, the things in the OS side thing that I talked about earlier. These areas have working groups have charter, and based on those working group charters, they produce various different outputs. And how do we finalize things? We have something called as an Internet Engineering Steering Group, which is made up of all the ADs and the IETF chair. They have the final say in approving a document. Again, there are set criteria. It's not like they can just block things. There is a way in which they can raise a discuss. That is, they want more information. They want a discussion, and after that discussion, among the ADs, they consider whether the document is ready to move ahead. So it's again completely open, no backroom channels. Everything is documented. Every AD inputs are often, even ISG calls are completely open. So anybody can come and participate and listen how those discussions are happening. So that's how our IETF thing is. I'm part of this Internet Architecture Board, the things in yellow that you see, which is on top. I think I have a slide on that. Then we have a research arm, which is IRTF. E is engineering, things that needs to be developed now that might get deployed right away. Research is something which we are going to do more future term, where we don't really know what we want. We need to tease things out a little bit more and understand. That's where the research part comes in. And all research groups are sort of different. Some research groups do produce a lot of experimental results and they write experimental RFCs. Some research groups are more of a discussion venue so that they can get inputs from these things. Some things that we were just talking about in the morning session. There are some research groups like HRPC, which looks at human rights consideration that comes from IETF output. Gaia, which looks at how do we interconnect the few folks who are not connected yet. What are the technologies, community network, what can be improved, and what are other people already doing this thing. So a lot of information exchange as well. And on top is, of course, the LLC, which is our administrative body, and the RFC editors, which is outside. Why it's outside? Because RFCs are not just from IETF, even IRTF writes RFCs, IAB writes RFCs, and even independent folks can write RFCs. So that's why RFC editor sits outside. A little bit word about IAB. So we provide long-term technical direction. Our aim is to provide an architectural oversight that everything that has been done in the IETF fits in the broader scheme of how we the values of the internet architecture from the start. We also, IRTF chair is part of the IAB, and of course we review and decide which research group to create, which research group to close down. We are basically a source of an advice and guidance, long-term guidance to the IETF in general. And on the right side, you will see there are a bunch of other activities we do. It's chartered as a committee for the IETF, as well as we have a very close relationship with the ISOC as well. So we are an advisory body to ISOC. We don't take part in the ISOC's day-to-day activities at all. Our aim is to provide advice to ISOC board as and when they need it, especially when it comes to technical matters of the internet. Things like architectural oversight. So sometimes we write RFCs when we think that IAB has something to say on a particular matter. We organize workshops. Recent workshops that we did was called AI Control, which is about how our AI models, which are scraping all the web, how does any website can be able to tell whether that data should be ingested for an AI model. And there are lots of policy concerns. Can it be just a Boolean switch? Does it need to go better? What if I want to have more control? Is robots.txt, which is the usual one that the Google uses for normal web crawling, is that enough? Because that is an output of IETF. Is whether that enough? Should something new come up? So this kind of very high-level architectural discussions, that's recently what we do. We are planning the next one, which is on network management. So again, looking at networks are getting more and more complex. Many people have moved to new technologies, especially because lots of things are being now hosted on clouds. So how do we merge and learn from, like, our cloud hosting, network management at that versus your network management of your physical network? What can we learn? What can change? What are the new technologies that we need to invest in? These kind of things we will do on those workshops. We also have some IAB programs which are thinking about, for instance, environmental impact of internet and discussing what are the research questions, what are things that we can engineer right now. So things that can engineer right now, how do I start measuring inputs very, very quickly? That work is already getting chartered. And then there is proposal on what are future research. So there are future research like carbon routing. Like when I'm making routing decision, should I take carbon imprint into decision as I route my packet across the world, which is sort of very futuristic as of right now. So those kind of big discussions are happening. And some of the things like we do a liaison relationship with all the other big bodies like ICANN, ISOC, IEEE, all the other SDOs as well, provide advice to ISOC, do outreach. I'm in fact the outreach coordinator of the IIB. So how our bodies goes and talk to people like you and make sure that more and more people are aware of what we are doing, because that's also is equally important. Standard process oversight, appeals, ISG, all that stuff. Let's move ahead. Let's talk a little bit about what are our open internet standards principle that IETF sort of believe in. So one of our key principle is we want any device, any service, any applications to interop in a completely interconnected, heterogeneous. We don't want all devices to be exactly the same. So they need to be heterogeneous, and there should be a capital I internet, a global network of networks, and a single global network of networks. So that any of our standards that we want to produce, we want to make sure that it aligns with this particular vision. So some of our inputs which are more applicable, not at the capital I internet, when they are like proposals, which are like, which are only applicable in a data center networks, and they are not as useful outside, will get less value within an IETF sort of system. That's one way of look at it. I did talk about our outputs are free. We focus on technical quality and voluntary deployment. Now let's talk about our process. So the way we run our IETF process is, again, sort of open. Anybody can come, join the mailing list. Anybody can listen in. To participate, you have to go to meetings, but meetings is not where the work, actual work happens. Meeting is just to push people forward, come together, and we know that we are humans. Human needs human connection. We have seen when during COVID years when we tried to do the whole thing. Yes, the cycle goes on. Existing works continue to chug along, but new work becomes harder because we are not making those human connections that are needed sometimes in these spaces. So our meetings are very much focused on human connections, moving things forward. Let's gather everybody in the same room and move things ahead. But that's not all important. There have been IETF RFCs that have been written by folks that have never visited an IETF meeting in person, and it's possible. It's not this thing. It takes a little bit more effort, might be a little harder. You need to have good connections to people who are going to the meetings in some ways, but it is definitely possible. And even then, there is things like remote meeting attendance is there are fee waivers for that. So you can come and listen in and participate, raise your hands, put questions, available even in our IETF meeting setting. So it's everyone can participate. Nobody is excluded from our process. And thing that we do is rough consensus and not voting. Let's move ahead. One thing which I was asked was many people talked about RFC, that yes, good thing is people know about it. That is our final output. Our standard is called RFC. It stands for request for comments, which actually doesn't make much sense if it is actually a standard, but because the name is historic. RFCs goes way before IETF was even created. It was the idea how initial research on internet, people used to exchange ideas. At that time, they were actually requesting for further comments via those outputs. But then since they had the brand value, that's what we continue to use even for actual standards. And it's not like our RFCs are immutable. That RFC number is immutable. Once an RFC 100 is published, that remains there, but RFCs can be made historic. You can have a new RFC that updates a previous RFC. You have an RFC that obsoletes a previous RFC. So work continues to happen, but once an RFC has been printed, it's archived, it's immutable after that. Not all RFCs are standards. So as what I mean by that is, there is a particular RFC type called internet standard or proposed standards. You can also have experimental RFCs, informational RFCs, right? So those RFCs are also there, which are output from both IETF, and some of the RFCs are not from IETF itself, where I was talking about IAB, IRTF, and even independent stream. In fact, ITF has this thing we write in April 1st, full RFCs. If somebody has never heard of it, go and search. They are really funny. One of the most famous one is IP over avian carrier. So, wow. And then how do we reach an RFC? Our initial input, when the things are not final, that's an internet draft. So, and anybody can post an internet draft. There are this thing, and they are a contribution to the ITF. And then they are not published, they are sort of posted. And there is a naming scheme, and it's a little bit like, yes, you need to know a little bit tooling. There is some people prefer writing it in XML, some write it in Markdown, some people write it in text. It will take your input. It needs to be formatted in one particular way. And there are various work that has been happening to make it more user-friendly and catch up with the new publishing thing. But yeah, that's our internet draft. How to bring in new work into ITF? One thing is, like, it's not the ISG, it's not the IAB. We decide what work we need to do in the ITF. Like, there is no diktat that I can say that today, let's start working on this because I feel this is important. What it needs to come from bottom up. It needs to be shown that there is a community of folks within this thing who will actually work on it. So it's contribution driven, not top up, bottom up. And you need to prove first that there is a problem that is worth solving. Not just because you have a good idea, which looks good on paper. Yes, you are solving, you are making something very, very optimal. But would it actually change and solve a problem for someone who is on the internet? That needs to be proved first. And whether the problem fits within the scope of an ITF. As you know, there are so many organizations who are working in this space. You will hear from a lot of them today as well. And we don't want to touch each other's toes. There is a very specific scope of this is the part that the ITF works on. This is IEEE, this is 3GPP, this is even not a standards change, this is a policy discussion. So then it needs to go into ICANN, for instance, and all the other things that happen. So whether it is a thing that ITF can solve, whether it aligns with the internet architectural principles that are very key to us, and we will not deviate from. That's where maybe the IAB role comes in. Like when a new work is done, IAB gives its feedback, whether yes, architecturally, does it fit into what we believe internet should look like. Scope should be well defined. It should not be a research, it should be an engineering problem, especially within ITF when we are talking about, and there are enough willing people to work on this. That's how we charter new work into ITF. Now, since this is inSIG, I also wanted to cover a little bit technically. When all the things that I was talking today, ITF, many people would think like what's it has to do with internet governance. And on paper, on direct thing, yes, it's all technical standards. Technical standards shouldn't do much directly with internet governance. But we have all seen that that's not always true. The technical decisions that are taken at ITF impacts people's life. And some of them, because the way those decisions have been taken in the past by people who were present at that time, their biases leads to technical standards looking a particular way. And that people at ITF, people all over do recognize that, and we want to change that. So we started with doing research work. Let's analyze how various protocol choices have led to human rights consideration and missing some people and making interconnections harder because of the decision that we took at the technical layer. And if there were people who had good understanding of the policy side available at that room, how would that have changed, and what we can do now that we have this understanding that we have these biases, how do we get rid of them? And same way, when the policy decisions are being taken outside, where there are no technical people to give input to say that this is technically not viable, or what are the technical unintended consequences you will have by your action, that creates a big problem. So we need to have mechanisms for us to work together. I took two examples. First is risk of fragmentation. And let's say in India, we care about a particular thing. We want there to be a regulation that clearly says that within this national boundary, the internet should work in this particular way. And true, India has a right to do that. It cares about its citizens. It wants the citizens to work in this way. But we need to also realize that internet at an infrastructure level is a global internet. Putting national boundaries on internet doesn't really work. it will create way more problems than solving it. We have to come up with creative ways to solve this without impacting the infrastructure. So anytime we think of applying particular laws or this, whether it impacts protocols or whether it impacts, like for instance, let's block a protocol. How would that have a huge impact on things? That needs to be understood. So how we implement what we want from our national regulations versus how we implement them at a global level is very, very important. Some things are like, even blocking and filtering. Uh, the mechanisms that we are going to use for blocking and filtering. Some proposes, like for instance, what happened with X thing in Brazil, where let's block all VPNs. Now that has a huge impact. Even though you wanted, in your mind, wanted to do good for your country, but not considering how blocking something at the infrastructure level, where it is being used by corporates, by students, by this, by human rights folks, for people who want to care about their privacy for various different reasons, you are taking an access away from them as well. And that's missed out at some level. So anything that blocks at an infrastructure protocol at this level is a big, big no-no. And IETF and IAB always says that like this will have a way more bigger impact than what you think is happening. And this is again based on our Lego blocks thing, that how we believe in this permissionless innovation, that is the core principle of IETF. Anything that we develop new needs to coexist with already there, since we can't force anyone to upgrade. Everything needs to work with a legacy system, and any work needs to be done in such a way that the legacy and the new system can work hand in hand. Any change that we make, there cannot be a flag day on internet anymore. We can't say that like, oh, let's make a switch and change something. So those are very, very key principles. And any work at IETF has to be neutral. It has to be done in such a way that it allows us to be interconnect. The existing internet should not get impacted in any way. And that's why the idea of doing things in building blocks, and the people who are integrating those building blocks play a very, very critical role. And they have a liability, as well as the IETF, the people who are building the blocks and the people who are interconnecting the blocks share a huge burden. It's a shared responsibility that they need to take care of the overall systems while we are doing that. I did mention this a little bit, like how technical community and internet governance needs to work together in this multi-stakeholder model that we have, and we need folks from both sides to be present. At IETF, though we are very much focused on the technical side, there are lots and lots of opportunities if you are not from the technical side and focusing more from the policy angle and from the human resource angle. There are still opportunities, and I think we will be talking about that in the panel discussion as well. So I'll try to cover them there. This is our upcoming IETF meeting. We are meeting in Dublin in November. Again, I'm flying on first, which is Diwali, so which is kind of, but then I'll be celebrating my Diwali in Dublin with a bunch of other people, Indian people there. I wanted to also talk a little about new work at IETF, which is sometimes exciting, and this time especially is something which is sort of far-reaching. We are talking about digital emblems. We have all seen digital emblems like Red Cross and this, and they have in the law a particular meaning that during an armed conflict they cannot be impacted. Now we know that our warfare is also moving digital. So is there a scope for having a digital emblem? That is, this particular resource is being used, is being protected under the same law, and how do I communicate that to the world in a safe way, where it doesn't become an attack vector, where it does. So there is a lot of confusion on how do we scope the problem, because there are things that the press folks may want, that as a press, I'm carrying a press sign, that means something. When I am a van on which a server is running, it's used by hospital, how do I tell that information? So there is a big discussion on how do we scope the problem. But this is pretty interesting. There is already some work that is happening. There's a white flag protocol that has already seen some implementation, but they want to bring that work under IETF so that we can broaden it, make sure that the building block that we develop is being used for more and more cases, and it's stable enough to be used and deployed in innovative ways. So this is again an example of how we think of framing the problem, not of solving it for just one use case, but preparing it in such a way that it acts as a building block that can be used by multiple people. Another one, deep space. How do we make sure that our IP protocol and things that we use on ground can also be used in deep space, especially between Moon and Mars? And of course, the kind of latency and the distance and the link downs that we will see. How do we take care of that? There is already an IETF work which deals with that, which is more focused on time variant routing. That is how our satellites are moving across the world and how they will lose links, how the routing decisions will change, how I can schedule them in advance. This is taking it to the next level. And the main discussion is this something that is researchy, or are we ready to engineer some solution out there? Some set of folks say that, yes, all we need is a quick profile. Let's change our transport profile a little bit, change our timers. And by changing the timers, yeah, things should work. And there are some test results that prove that. Some people believe that no, the bundle protocol that's been done by delay tolerant folks, that's the right approach. You should not do IP there. So there is a lot of debates on this. That's what we will be discussing in the next ITF. So again, focusing at this thing. Some other ones, which are high performance wide area network. This is basically coming from AI clusters and people who run research networks, like even within India and others, which are moving a lot of data across, which needs high performance, low latency, but in an AI environment, not maybe always using the public internet. They might be using some shared infrastructure, may not be public internet, maybe public internet, but then what is the changes there? So main changes what they want to make is work on ITF produced transport protocols, but how do we make them faster and make them work in this new environment? That's why this is within the scope of ITF, because lots of people initially were like, no, let that be done by Ultra Ethernet, let them be done by us. There is a Tesla's proposed protocol in that space as well. And this one is more dealing with how do we use ITF protocol to meet those requirements. Then final one, which is RESTful provisioning protocol. This is basically extending an extensible provisioning protocol, EPP, which is XML based. It's old, 20 years old. It's used for domain name management. People want to make that like, oh yeah, let's move ahead. Let's use the latest technology. Let's move towards REST, use JSON. People don't like XML these days as much as they used to. So, and some of the CCTLDs are already doing it. So there is running code behind it. Now they just want to standardize it so that it sees more deployment. Final set of slides, various ways to participate at ITF. As I said, mailing list is where we do all the work. All you need is an email address, join the mailing list. You review other people's draft, you write codes that matches what people are doing, give feedback about that, come to a meeting, both remotely or in person. And final one is author documents. If you have new ideas, if you have something to say, author documents. Otherwise, there are various different ways to participate in an ITF meeting. If you choose to participate, how do we make it easier? There are various different tips. If somebody is interested, please reach out to me. I'm here. I'll share my email as well. And there is a community within India as well that we try to work. We call it IISOC, where we have been helping a lot of Indian folks who wants to participate in ITF, guide them, give them good instruction of how to approach it, what tools to use, and etc. etc. So there is a good community, very active WhatsApp group as well, of folks who want to get active in the ITF space as well. So I'll skip that, but reach out to me if you have more questions. Sort of a summary, all our work is over. Anyone can participate, it's free to join. We meet 3 times, next one is Dublin. There is a Bangkok meeting in March, so that is much closer to us. So if you're planning, think about that as well. And come and participate. And that's it. Thank you. We have a lot of time for questions, yes, I guess.
No, there's enough. Oh. So is there anyone who has, raise hands and we'll take the mic. So Yash and then Sulabh. Anyone else?
Dhruv, great session. Thank you so much. Sustainability on the internet is a very active topic these days, right? Across all ISTA institutions and in general. for example, during the pandemic, we saw a very rapid spike in data bandwidth consumption, right? So, for example, Netflix was, they changed the default resolution to HD across all streaming, right? Similarly, for a lot of sustainability, what we see, like Microsoft has just purchased a nuclear power plant. Who would have thought, right? My question to you is that, of course, there are different solutions or band-aid solutions across, let's just say at the consumer level or application layer, at the technical level, and you were briefly mentioning it, like carbon efficient routing of packets. If you could just share a little more on that.
So at ITF, Green BOF, which is now going to be in working group. So they are first focusing on the first problem is let's collect data, because unless we have data, we won't be able to solve anything. So our first answer to this issue is let's start from a node, from a link, from various different ways, start collecting what is our energy consumption. Once we have the data within an SDN system, next question would be how do we use that data? One thing that many people want to solve immediately is via a controller, maybe switching redundant links off. And we all know that within our system, if you look, what actually takes a lot of power? Is it the CPU? Is it this? Is it the line card? What is taking the power? What is the energy consumption that I need to reduce to make things work better? And then there is a debate upon, is it amount of data that matters, or is it keeping the lights on that matters over time? And there are interesting results looking at it. Some people say that no, switching off is more important. Some people say that no, if you compress more, if you start sending less data, it's the videos that have ruined the world. And if you just can compress it a little bit more and send less data, you will be able to save more thing. Then the other end of this thing is actually solve this on the data center level, don't come to the network level. So this is not a solved problem in any way. There are lots of schools of thoughts. What ITF is saying is let's have building blocks, propose things so that other people can continue to do this research on it. So our first output is let's write a set of mechanisms by which a device, any network device, can start exposing its energy consumptions level so that a controller can start using it. Then let a device have mechanism for dynamically switching on and off resources based on consumption of data, but not just at the device level, but at the sort of the network level. The third are the research set of problems. How do we decide which problem would have the maximum impact? What is worth solving? That's where the debates are on. We don't have a good answer. The future is what people are saying that why we have been routing transport engineering based on delay, based on bandwidth, based on this. Could it be based on carbon? And technically, many people say yes, of course. But then are they actually buyers? Is they actually going to solve a problem? That is unknown route. So that's where we need a research. And in fact, there is a research proposal in IRTF as well that has got to deal with it. So that's the landscape that I can give as of now.
Hi, Dhruv. Myself, Sulabh. So we have seen instances like in last year where there were huge outages because of companies like Microsoft and everything, right? And that has led to the whole shutdown, right? So what are your thought on auto remediation steps in those network where the network can heal itself? We are not there right there, but what are your thoughts on that? And second, since you talked about on NMS and NOS, like network management system and network operations, what are your thoughts on using of mixed reality like AR and VR on seeing those dashboards, because it's like trillions of data flowing in each minute, right? So what are your thoughts on using mixed reality for solving those network operations and network management systems used by NOS engineers?
Let me take the second part first. In the second part, there is a research group called Network Management Research Group. They have a project on digital twin and digital maps, which is very much what you are talking about, that how I have a twin of my whole network that I can visualize, that I can see in an innovative dashboards, so that I can visualize all the data network streaming outputs that are coming from my network and manage my network in a better way. Right now, there are some products, like even my company claims to do it, but it's way far off. Like if you're imagining things like, especially in an AR, VR way, we are not there yet. But many people are actually starting to think in that direction. And within the ITF spoke, that is the research part. Within the ITF folk, we have a new working group called Network Management Operations, which is starting to look at moving away from looking at networks outputs only in terms of like the small network telemetry and this, but looking more in time series databases, merging network management protocols that we use like Yang, Netconf, RISCONF, merging it with Kafka and other databases, and doing better incident management, anomaly management. So this is the stage we are in as of now. But what you are talking about is the vision further down the line. And and your first part was, just remind me quickly. Yeah. So outages part. So within ITF, like as you say, that we can't really control the implementation. This was an implementation issue, especially an issue where we have a same implementation being used across so many different places. And that's where the heterogeneity of our networks we are losing a little bit. And everybody who designs a system, when so many people depend on the same thing, and this we saw with open source as well. When there is a bug in an open source, OpenSSL or Open this, which is used by everyone, and that bug gets this, it doesn't impact just one implementation, one type of device, it has a global impact. So in DNS systems, sometimes we see that since every person, every DNS operator use the same software, if it can be exploited in so much bigger scale. So this is more of a question of resiliency of our system itself. When we have more heterogeneous systems, that automatically improves. And it's sort of the vision of an ITF, that we write our documents in such an open way that there should be more implementation, but market reality, various other features don't always match. And sometimes they win over the grand vision of like, oh yeah, there should be. And in fact, earlier internet was like that. Everybody had their own implementation, interconnecting and meeting this thing. But we have moved away from that because of the scale, because of various different reasons. But if you are a system integrator, you are the person who's building this risk factor that you are. If you are using somebody's building block and there is a bug in it, how much impact will it have on your system? It will be global. We seeing this. It's very hard to get away from it. This thing, we discussed this within the IIB as well, that can we say anything, can we do anything? And we realize that this is a problem that we as in building block makers can't solve.
So we'll take 3 questions together.
Hi, sir. I'm Anita Walker, and I'm very interested in RFCs and but I never tried to even explore it. But my question is suppose we want to author something, but we don't know much about it, and we're also concerned that a new idea. I mean, how do we safely share and know that it's gonna be safe without it being taken over by someone else or?
Yeah, I didn't cover this, that ITF has sort of like their own copyrights and IPR sort of rules. So once you put something in an internet draft, yes, you own a copyright, but you also give copyright for folks to build on it.
No, I get that. My question is till we reach that stage, like a new person who's got ideas and who's if you see IT people, we all know that our ideas can be stolen. Because someone small's idea, someone big comes and takes it and makes it even bigger, right? So how do we protect ourselves and how do we find a safe space where we can validate the idea, basically, and then draft it?
So I think that, like anything that has to be done on a human trust level first, talk to people that you trust. But one thing which I wanted to say was that anybody can write an internet draft. So if you in fact want to protect your IPR, or if you don't want somebody else to have an IPR claim on it, the best thing is to just put an internet draft in open about it and nobody could ever claim an IPR on it. So some people who want, this technology should be IPR free and I don't want somebody else to claim it. That's why many people use ITF for that purpose. In general, once you have put anything as an internet draft, your norm is right there. There's a date attached to it. It's this. Even if somebody wants to build, and it's very common. Many drafts gets combined. Many drafts there's authorships changes. And in fact, in ITF, we sort of say that you are an editor of our documents. You're not. We have authorship at the initial stage, but once ITF decides it's want to work on it, you become an editor. And what you are writing is what this group has a consensus on it. And you have to take everybody. So the authorship values goes away. That's
Okay, Anita, we'll take the other
Yeah.
questions.
Thank you, Dhruv. That was a very interesting presentation. Introducing myself, I'm Dr. Mini from ISAC Trivandrum. So one of the slides you had shown that it's only 1.9% contributions from India. Whereas when you talk about the number of users, we are huge numbers. So it's a general question. I know, thanks for you being in INSEG because this is one place where you are exposing. What are the other activities which makes people know that these are the things you can do into this? Do you have any such activities happening as a community?
So we had done connections event. We are planning one before our Bangkok meeting as well in India and Bangalore. We have done earlier in Kolkata as well. So we do our bits in getting more and more people out there. One thing which my pitch in is like there are lots engineers, but we have this mindset that, oh, we are given one task, we want to fix this task. ITF works on timescales that your project timescales cannot meet. So it usually works when people have a drive within themselves that you want to work on it. Sometimes you get lucky, you convince your manager at your higher team that yes, this is worth investing long term in it. I first want to always say that breakout of, like, I talk to so many engineers within India, they say, oh, there is a standards team in my organization, they'll take care of it. That is the mindset that I feel is the biggest problem. That needs to break. No, it's your idea. You came up with it. You found this problem. Why are you not documenting it? And then partner within your organization. Sometimes I know that you have your on this within your organization, even outside the organizations. Partner with people so that you can also contribute. And once you got in, I also did the same. I had found a bug. I said, this is a problem in the protocol itself. I want to fix it. Went to the ITF, and I never thought that I will be coming back. I was like, this is one output, this. But once you got into it, I felt like, yes, this is where, in fact, I feel good. My skills are useful. I am this kind of social person who likes to solve problem together in a global sort of a setting. So that I continued. So, and that's been the reason with lots and lots of people within India as well. Most of the time, it is this mind that no, yeah, this is not something that we do.
Or maybe they are not knowing that's such a thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Sheila from Uganda. So taking you back to that pie chart that you displayed that showed Africa covering 2%, what activities or programs do you have running to expand that? Because it's not just Africa, there's the Middle East, I'm seeing the Australia, New Zealand. Those are really, really, really small numbers. And yet, on ground, there are actually so many internet users. So I'm going to use Africa. The internet coverage is pretty high. So what are you doing to expand that, the knowledge of the ETF and the work you do?
We are doing things, but so much more needs to be done. Main activity that ISOC runs. So ISOC and ITF partner in this. As you said, that ITF is more focused on the technical side, but we do partner on ISOC, and we rely on ISOC to take the word to a lot of people. In fact, in this meeting in Ireland, we run a program which is very much specific to how do we bring policymakers and let them understand about ITF processes. And there are, latest I heard, around 8-9 policymakers from across Africa. Since the meeting is in Ireland, it's much easier, same time zone. They are coming to meeting. In fact, there have been talks about having meeting. We haven't had a meeting of ITF in India as well. There are talks. Hopefully, we'll get there. Meeting in Africa is very much needed. It's very, very small steps, but we all are cognizant of it, and we all need to work very, very hard to meet this. And even folks from the continent as well. Just getting a meeting will not solve. We went to Buenos Aires. We went for the first time in South America. It didn't change with the graph in any particular way. So we need to have a way in which both of things works. ITF tries to make effort to go and reach out to more people, but at the same time, we need to make sure there are enough engineers, enough people dedicated enough to contributing back regularly to the ITF as well. So both needs to be done together.
Good morning, Dhruv.
Yeah, morning.
It's always a pleasure to listen to you. So just a simple question. IPv6 has been around for a very long time now, but it is not at the level at which we were expecting. So do you think there is any technical reason which is stopping this, or it is more of an adoption problem?
If you ask me, I think it's a mix of both. When we were solving the IPv6, the people who were solving the IPv6 problem now around 20 years ago, they had a vision, they had something that, yes, they were thinking, yes, it will see a deployment instantly. Because in their mind, they were solving a real problem that was approaching. But like anything else, lots of other different things happened at the same time. When we were solving the IPv6 problem, the translation technologies were not that, there were a few ideas, but it wasn't yes, they will be this commercial viable and it will continue to solve people's problem for a very, very long time. People did not imagine that. They wrote an IPv6 from a point of view was, we'll switch it off, we'll move to IPv6, everything will be fine. But later what happens, there was this translation that came in, which was very, very successful. And some of the translation was also developed by ITF. It's bottom up, we can't control. We said that once we have committed to IPv6, we will not allow any translation. That we can't do. It's a bottom up organization. Their ideas, it's solving somebody's problem. It will be documented in an RFC. And that's what happened. Now, people who see values have moved ahead. Within India, we know there are lots of people who still are in that state that their IPv4 continues to solve their current problem. And our pitch sometimes to them has been like, just move to the new technology, but it might not impact your bottom line. It's not going to change how you do network operations. It's just the right thing to do. And that doesn't sell. And that's where we are. So it's a mixed bag, I would say.
This is the last question.
Thank you, Amrita. Thank you, Dhruv, for your wonderful talk here, wonderful picture. I've never heard this kind of very good overview of the whole ITF. I'm Dr. Govind, for the record. My question is a larger question from the Indian perspective. I think for a long time when I was in ICSI and in the ministry, we were trying to hold a ITF meeting in India. You must be knowing. Shubham is here. Santosh must be contacting you, Amrita and Satish Babu. We are trying but what is that threshold level? You said, it is not holding ITF is important, but more how many people are participating, how many RFCs are there. So where do you feel that, we have reached certain level to organize an ITF meeting in India?
Yeah. So I think we have definitely solved the problem of proving to them that there are enough people within India who are interested, who are seeing the technology, who are well aware, who are not going to be a tourist to a particular meeting. So that we have already solved. They have seen, we did lots of events back then also to prove to them that we have reached there. Now it's more of a logistical issue. So they are looking at few Indian cities. Some of ITF has a very particular, meetings requirements that, they wanted to do in Bangalore. Bangalore hotels are actually not meeting those requirements. There are a set of RFCs that guide us. How do we pick a venue as well? So this is how you pick a venue, and these are red lines. These are okay to change, and this is what the LLC would want. So they are at the stage of looking at assessments. I don't think so I need to hide. They are now thinking about Bombay, because Bombay's venues in some ways have been pretty good and we have no issues. Another option is doing it in Delhi, Pragati Maidan. Bangalore, more or less, they have given up on because they are not able to even find one venue that meet their requirements. So there are talks in the background. I'll continue to push. This is something that I care about as well with Anupam and other people. I've worked, this is the vision that we have. But at the same time, I want to be cognizant that what we have to more focus on is what happens after we have had an ITF in India. If it leads to this thing, it will just be remembered and people will say, look, we went to Buenos Aires, we went to India, nothing changed. That's what we want to avoid in this case. And that, as us, the things that are in our hand is that part. When ITF comes, and I can be pretty sure when, I'm not saying if, we are ready to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dhruv, for the wonderful presentation. Just a moment. Mini, if you could just hand over the...
Thank you so much.
That is so good, so nice and so
Thank you.
So Dhruv would be around. You can catch him up later for more comments. And Anupam?
Yes, I'm there.
He will literally push you out.